Hello and welcome to The Testing Show, Synthetic Data in Testing. This show was recorded on Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. And with that, let's get on with the show.
Well, hello and welcome back. This time on The Testing Show, we want to take a different topic that's becoming increasingly important, which is synthetic test data. If you work in any kind of large customer data environment, you increasingly can't use the real data because of problems with privacy. But if you fake up your own data and it's limited, it's not a representational sample. So how do you do both? And Qualitest has had some success working with partners through that process. And we've got a real case study to talk about today with real experience. And to talk about that today, we've got a real use case with a working customer, and that is Pat Rinaldo. He is the Chief Information Officer for the automotive and insurance divisions of Ally Bank, located close to me, Detroit, Michigan. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here.
Did I get anything wrong in that?
Well, you got it right. Now, my full name is Pasquale. I should have made you say that because you would have never gotten that right. But I gave you the short version, so no problem at all. You got it.
Thanks. And we also have, and Qualitest has been working with Ally Bank for some time, and we have Naresh, Kumar, Nunna, who's an associate vice president with Qualitest, focusing on synthetic data and cloud. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. And you're coming to us today from Dallas?
Yes, I'm in Dallas.
Okay. Is the team that's working on this, do we have people in Detroit? Do we have people all over?
It's mostly we are still embracing the remote culture. So we have people definitely working across North America, India, different locations.
And as always, we have Michael Larsen with us. Morning, Michael. Good time zone.
Good time zone is right. Good to be here. It is 6:09 where I am right now. So good morning, and there's no sunlight yet.
So did I miss anything about synthetic test data and why it's important?
I think you hit it well. For us, that foundation in data protection and data security and ensuring the sanctity of our customers' data was already in place, has been for a long time. What we struggle with is the coverage, ensuring that we have enough test data to actually prove out what we need to prove out to be able to validate our systems, especially when you're going into something that is brand new and you don't have any sample data or any examples of how it might look. So that's been a challenge for us. It's a lot of effort to really develop through manual methods the type of data that you might need to move quickly. And so we see synthetic data as that enabler for how we're going to be able to innovate at the rate that we need to innovate. So if you'd add anything to that.
Yeah, I think you summarized it well. I think I would say Ally is definitely way past the line, way past maturity in terms of their journey with the test data management. I think there is three things which I would probably look at what I'm observing with Ally and outside as well mostly. If you're focusing on automation, focusing on AI, focusing on operational efficiency, synthetic data is the way to go. It's really not touching all the key essentials, ingredients, which a lot of businesses are looking for today.
How did that go when Qualitest started working with Ally? How did we start this partnership together? Where did we come from to get where we are today? It wasn't overnight, right?
I take a long time to get comfortable with people and with some of the groups that we work with. We started working with Qualitest a couple of years ago. They brought a lot to the table in terms of thought leadership in the testing space. Originally, we started in smaller, more consulting type agreements and started to expand into spots where they were taking more ownership of individual pieces of testing. And through that journey, that really helped us to understand how their culture fit with ours, how their ambition and ways of working fit with ours. And we accelerated the relationship at the end of 24, where they took on a managed testing service for one of our most significant application spaces. And that really gave them a strong foothold and really helped them help us to accelerate our journey, accelerate the quality of our testing, And a big part of that has been the mentoring and thought leadership that they provided as it relates to synthetic test data. We had already started down that path, especially in our analytics and reporting area, where we're able to, through our own models, build the type of synthetic data that we need. But we hadn't really stepped into the application space and being able to synthesize full auto loans and the types of data that we need. And so that's where they've been able to lean in and help us quite a bit.
So if I could step in here again, I oftentimes take on the role of the beginner of a given area, and this fascinates me. So for those people who may not really understand, test data is test data, right? Why are we making a distinction here between test data and synthetic test data? In other words, what is the distinction? And again, I want to present this from a perspective of some people might not understand the distinction and why it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I can take that. Test data traditionally has been sourced from production environments, production staging environments. Generally, you copy it, you mask it, and you provide a copy of de-identified data in the lower environments, whether it is dev, QA, performance, or capacity environments. I think with synthetic data, it's a bit different in terms of we use algorithms, we use statistical models, we use machine learning techniques to create lookalike data, which is artificially generated, but it is very close resemblance to what our real data looks like from the real world events, real world characteristics, real world property standpoint. What I would call it as a digital twin, which is made out of systematic algorithms.
So that
So
sounds like a lot to me. Using machine learning to analyze the real data to come up with predictive algorithms to create the fake data. So one of the things that frustrates me, there's a book called The Phoenix Project, and if you read it very carefully, it's everything is terrible, everything is terrible, everything is terrible. The hero comes in, 6 months later, everything's fine. That book should have been about those 6 months. Speaking of which, what were the barriers you found when you tried to do this? And how did you overcome them?
Like most technology projects or any type of initiative, you have the human barriers and you have the technical barriers. On the human side, people are comfortable with a certain way of working. They're comfortable with the risk they're taking or how they're accomplishing their day-to-day work, and they're often skeptical of something new. For us, we're an agile shop, so we're constantly learning, we're constantly innovating and improving. That mindset to take on new technology, not only is it part of the DNA of my team, but it's part of the DNA of Ally. We're constantly innovating, and we have a long track record of that. Starting with that base of innovation, that base of continuous improvement, that helped us on the human side, but you still have to tackle the change management. You still have to prove to people that you can be successful, and you have to be able to explain to them what it means to them. On the technical side, when you think about the duration of an auto lease or the duration of an auto loan or an insurance policy, those are many, many years. You've got in the US 50 different states to deal with, different regulations everywhere. So when you look at a loan that might be in its first 6 months, or it's 2 years in, or it's 5 years in, and the person went through bankruptcy or what have you, there's a tremendous variety in that data. And being able to synthesize that and create something that truly is realistic and that the systems believe is something that grew up within them and developed within them in the same way a customer would, that is extremely challenging. And so being able to get all of the data that we needed to profile, being able to start building those models, we're still in the midst of it, but it is definitely an uphill climb, but the payoff is fantastic. I don't know, Naresh, I probably simplified it way too much.
I think you covered, I was actually thinking about like 5 folds. One is the quality aspect of it. I have the data, but do I have enough of it from a coverage perspective? I want to test not just the positive scenarios. I also want to test the boundary scenarios, edge case scenarios, or things I might not find in data which copies that I use today, which is obviously limiting my testing. And there is possibility I could find these events only in production, which is not what our businesses, our customers are looking for. I think speed aspect of it, I think you covered it as well. We're no longer talking about monthly and quarterly releases. We are talking about intraday releases, weekly releases. And if I go with the traditional methods, if it takes too long for me to procure the data, then when I'm going to test it, when I'm going to release it. The key piece which you also touched is the culture. We've been used to this traditional methods of using test data. Do I really need to change it? I have so many responsibilities, me as a tester. I have to write the automation scripts. I have to understand the requirements. I have to execute the test cases. I have to retest it. The effect management, right? I have so many things I have to do already. Why I have to do one more activity? Which is again another mindset shift, thinking more of this as an enabler. It's not an additional work. Yes, it might feel initially as an additional work, but you do this today. If you are a tester, there's been a lot of studies. 40 to 60% of the time testers spending today on preparing test data, creating and conditioning test data.
For sure.
I think that's where I feel it's becoming a barrier, but I think where I've seen which ally, they already had some of those things addressed. And it's just a matter of showcasing the people with small successes. The use case which Pat elaborated, explained very clearly. I don't just want the data. I want the data as if it looks like how it's been like 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. It's been really a difficult journey, but I think we're getting there.
So if I can interject here just a little bit, this is something that intrigues me because of a project that I'm currently working on. And one of the interesting challenges that we face in the sense that right now, and I think I'm on safe ground to say this, I'm not sharing any secrets, I'm working on a pretty big internationalization project, which means that a lot of the data that we're currently working with is going to be directed to multiple locales. It's going to be directed to multiple countries, multiple alphabets, multiple examples. And one of the challenges that we face, of course, with this is the data that you tend to put in, especially if you're pulling information from a database, if that data is structured a particular way, or it's structured for, let's say, the US market. Is it still going to be fit for use if you apply it, say, in India, or if you apply it in Japan or China? But I mean, help me out here, because that is a reality that I face a lot of the time when I'm doing and examining translations. And I have to stop and pause and say, hold on, why is it? Oh, right, that's coming from the database. That's being pulled in X way, blah. Okay, but let's say that you need to make sure that you have a seamless integration with multiple locales with your data. Now, this might be beyond what I'm talking about here, but I'm just looking at it as an expanded use case. How would you approach something like that? Is that something that's in the scope of what you're doing, or am I talking about something totally different?
It is within the scope of what you're talking about as well. Different use cases. But one thing you did talk about is when I have a data today, maybe a lot of data what I have is based out of English as a primary language. I might not have data for certain customers or certain events that might have happened in a different location or a different region. So that's where synthetic data comes into picture. It doesn't have to be the data that I already have because it's all generated. There are ways to do it. This is how I'm going to look like from a structure standpoint. This is the language, and this is the type of data I'm looking for. If you can define in a simple structure and plain English, you can generate it. Or if I already have what I'm looking for, maybe it's in a different language. Can you take this as a sample and do it? Yes, that's doable as well, right? So that's where the technology has evolved compared to what we were seeing. While synthetic data has been there for more than 2 decades, the technology what we have seen in the last 5 years is significantly matured. It can do it with samples. It can do it with just plain vanilla structure and schema definition, which could be used for a wide variety. One thing we use when we are training Google search, you need data when somebody's searching in their own locales. You need data to train them. And there is only limited searches would have happened in the history for that particular language. But I'm testing this new translation engine. Where do I get the data from? If you look at even further, a lot of these autonomous vehicles that are coming out in the market, they don't have enough history of data to test their vehicles. There's a lot of data, hypothetical scenarios that's being generated using machine learning algorithms and systematic algorithms to create the data. The applicability has been exponential. We're not only talking about traditional software testing. We are doing for product, we're doing for IoT devices, we're doing for autonomous vehicles, and so many more.
Michael is definitely working on some interesting things. So maybe a little beyond what I have to tackle, but we do have similar challenges in terms of talk about auto loans in the 50 different jurisdictions. So the attributes are different throughout all of these different areas, but the basic concept of you have a car and you're making a payment, that's pretty clear. We all understand that. That's the day-to-day. Being able to take that and extrapolate it into how that should be represented, what the component parts are across all of these geographies, it's not that different than what you're talking about. And it is something that we've been able to solve.
Another piece to that when it comes to testing with synthetic data. Let's say you succeed. We've modeled a portfolio of 1,000 different loans. We think these loans realistically are similar to what our customers do. We've got, maybe it's 10,000. We've got all of our jurisdictions in there. We've got positive cases. We've got negative cases. We've got combinatorics. We got it all. Then somehow we have to do whatever we do, the processing of the payment. This month, some people are even later, some people are late, some people paid on time, some people didn't pay enough, some people paid too much. Adjust their balances and see where they end up. And then we got to know if the adjusted balance is correct. So we need an oracle to say, did you get the right answer with your synthetic data when you ran it through your modified program with all the changes that you made in the past 2 weeks? To get there, I think we need to talk about what is the core concepts of synthetic data, maybe a little bit on why it's becoming critical.
There's a lot of definitions out there in terms of what is synthetic data, how it should be. The way I look at it is how real it is compared to what you've been used to. Is it allowing me to test what I want to test? And is it allowing me to test which I did not do it before? What I've been used to test before is all positive scenarios, things which I know. But there is a lot of unknown things. For example, if you take fraud scenarios or AML scenarios, they're very, very complex. If you keep testing the product using a transaction which has already occurred in production, that means something already happened. You're only testing and detecting on history. But fraud is always about prediction in future. There is millions ways. How can I make my programs, my core, my products more futuristic? That's where you have to be a little more creative than what you've been used to. It really needs to represent the real world scenarios, not in the history. What could possibly happen in future? That's one of the key aspects which we see when we are creating synthetic data solution. Second, it's privacy by design. What happening is today, all the regulated customers, too much of focus to the privacy and compliance. There is so much of control, so much of governance. What if for all of those innovators, I will give you data which is privacy free? Just imagine how much less pressure they feel. Now they'll just only focusing on innovation. I just need to solve this business problem, less bother about the privacy and regulations which are tightening and growing every single day. The third is the control aspect. It's not just one size fits all. If I'm testing a machine learning model, I need one type of test, one type of data. If I'm testing an API, if I'm testing a cards product, or if you'll go by the test phases, if I'm doing a unit testing, component testing, integration testing, or UAT, all of those requires different sets of data, different permutations of the data. And you need to have, as a human, the power of what you need and how much you need. So that way you will specifically test what you intended rather than trying to figure out, I already have this data, how can I make my testing work? The fourth element is while we are using this data, there is also, especially in the traditional software side, and we also use it in the machine learning model training and finding the testing and efficacy and efficiency of those models. There might be some bias as well. Sometimes you wanted to create the bias to see how your model is performing. These are real world scenarios again. When I have these biases where I'm looking for certain type of customers with certain age ranges, if you suddenly give somebody who is like 250 years old, that's like outlier, one as an example. Second, you don't always want to give the data which is all only with one gender, one ethnicity. When you build this product, this builds for multiple people, irrespective of their origins, irrespective of ethnicities. You need to have the ability to test those boundaries of those machine learning models as well. Lastly, how quick I can do it. The on-demand is what a lot of today's DevOps is looking for. Create, test, validate, purge, and then redo. That's how quickly today's demands are. So if you have all of those five, you are going towards a success of implementing synthetic data.
How fast should that run? Do you want to be able to create all their test data? You tested
Yes,
down in an hour, a day?
minutes. Actually, we've
Minute.
done a lot in LA itself. The auto use case which Pat talked about. You create a loan and then you age a loan, you make a payment, you miss a payment, it becomes a delinquent, and there's different delinquency cycles to that. For doing this, it will take organically. If you go through the application process, batch process, it could take days. Now, if you can simulate all of these events, you know what happens from a business perspective. It can be solved in minutes.
Right. I mean, that's one case, but to run through all of your test cases, to
Yeah,
run
so
through
run
all,
through all the test cases for all the permutations and combinations. We've seen the success. Let's say if I take the whole regression cycle of running probably around 1,000 to 2,000 scenarios, usually regression cycles for this long is like a week or 2 weeks, if including the retesting, defect, defect fixes, we see in 1 to 3 days max.
yeah, that's what I was expecting. That's great.
Yeah,
And if I heard you correctly, you're saying that you have your existing data, but we want to make sure we seed it with a diverse selection, and we can use that to test for bias in our algorithms. Your example was the 250-year-old person taking out a loan. That's to test for fraud. Did I get that right? Or is it to test for errors?
It is just for testing origination functionality. Where do you have a customer who is opening a loan with his 250 years old? If I'm talking about auto loan origination standpoint, he may not be
I would think that would be
existing.
fraud, probably, would be my guess.
It could be a fraud too. Yes,
also,
it does
there's healthy
definitely fall
living,
into.
Matt. Maybe that's what Naresh is, I think, trying to lean in on is there are anomalies that you see in the data on a regular basis, but you can't always test for those. In terms of the boundary testing, in terms of edge cases, how do you solve for that? And that is something that synthetic data gives us, that even trying to manually create the data through the systems, it's very difficult to hit all of those edge cases. Set aside the amount of time it would take. The actual ability to do it's not always there. I want to go back to something you hit on earlier because I think it really highlighted one of the major benefits of using synthetic data in your test environments. You talked about not only do you have to create it, but then you have to simulate how customers would make their payments, at what frequency, at what amounts, what does that look like over time? We're able to look at historical trends. We're able to understand what that might look like on a regular basis, and it stays within a pretty narrow range. Unless, of course, there's something like a pandemic. If you think post-COVID in 2020, all of those things that we had looked at on a historical basis changed dramatically. We were at the forefront of leaning in and helping people to get through that time. And so help programs that maybe had 1 or 2% of our customers previously suddenly had 20 to 30 to 35% of the customers in it. But at that point in time, we didn't necessarily have the ability to create a data set that now represented 30% of the customers taking advantage of help programs. But with synthetic data, we would have been able to simulate that. We would have been able to understand it ahead of time, as opposed to having to react in real time and adapt on the fly. Now we have the ability to simulate through synthetic data any of these scenarios that might be well outside of what you would expect to see on a regular basis. Certainly 2025 is not disappointing us in variability as well. So it's going to be beneficial in trying to simulate some of the things that we might see over the next 6 to 9 months.
That's a great segue into what your vision is for what your company is trying to do with synthetic data, and how do you know that you've succeeded?
We've put a lot of investment already into strengthening our overall tech foundation, whether it be security, privacy controls, our data warehouse, and we've also put it into our engineering practices. We need to be nimble. We need to move quickly. The world changes faster than you can blink, and technology needs to be able to roll with it and adapt. The last mile, in my view, in terms of really being able to be innovative from a technology perspective, is being able to have the test data that you need so that everything else can move at the speed that it needs to move. Core for me is being able to allow our engineers and our agile teams to move unencumbered by test data constraints. That's the first one. So looking at our flow metrics to know that the throughput in our agile squads is going up, looking at the turn time on initiatives to make sure that that's improving. That's all around the speed. Then you have the efficiency ratios. How much testing is required for how much engineering, how much of the team's time is spent actively working versus waiting for test data creation or other things. So anything around efficiency. And then lastly, what's the escape velocity for defects? How much is making it into production? I expect to see that go way down because a lot of times when we do retrospectives on that escape velocity, what made it through the testing phases, it's often the edge cases, it's often the things that were outside of the test data set. And when you summarize that, speed to market, efficiency in the use of our engineers, and then quality increases because we have a full spread of test data across all of the things that we need to validate. Those are the metrics that we're looking at to see the impact of using synthetic data.
Makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, I was impressed. One of the things Michael and I like to talk about is reducing that final inspection regression test process. Because as soon as your regression test process takes too long, then everybody else is waiting for feedback and they're writing new code that's untested. That alone should get you the results. But if you can improve the quality of the testing at the same time, yeah. So how's that shown up, Pat? I mean, you've been doing it for a couple of years now.
We've been working with Qualitest for a couple of years. I would say we're just now scaling out our synthetic data into the application space. We've been in the reporting analytics space for quite some time with it, using our own models. That's been extremely successful to be able to get full coverage. If you think about a lot of the analytical tools and the reports, they're designed to handle all the cases that you might see over multiple years, but those don't generally exist all at the same time. We've been very successful in being able to generate the data required for that testing, and we've seen improvements in all the metrics. We've seen significant reductions in defects that make it through on the analytics side, and a lot of speed in terms of how our teams are able to develop. In the application space, the operational space, we're expecting to see the same results. It's a bigger hill to climb because you have to simulate. Michael was talking about it earlier. All of this data, it's not just landing into a well-formed data warehouse. It has to go back into these operational systems. And that's a bit of a bigger hill to climb, still early in the journey for us in terms of, are we going to see the results across those three dimensions that I talked? But all early signs point to yes, we're going to see it.
That brings us to today. This topic, a little bit like AI and ML, seems to be changing on the daily. If you were to look into your crystal ball, Naresh, what's next? What's the future outlook for synthetic data?
I think it's more of a use cases, where and how you use it. We've already seen synthetic data used in application development testing, and we've seen success there. I think there is more effort need to go into how do I train my models to be more predictive. That's definitely one area where we see a lot of room to grow. And most importantly, go beyond structured data. Today's data is not structured data anymore. So we have data coming from social networks, IoT devices, smart devices, robotics. So it's all going to be unstructured data, which is something not usable like we have been used to with the tables and columns and schemas. The other area where we don't have enough maturity or technology to do that today, but there's a lot coming in to support this modern applications. Well, we've also seen creatively one of the customer, they're heavily regulated customer. They want to move to the cloud, including the core applications. They've done the peripheral applications. They also want to migrate the core applications as well. Now their concern is, okay, can I just migrate it? I've already done for these peripheral systems. Can I just go and migrate the core systems as well? Business was not comfortable to do it because it's heavily regulated. They have to go through all of these processes again. They don't know how easy it's going to be the integration standpoint. So the idea was, okay, you don't have to put the real data first. Why don't you put synthetic data, shake out the whole environments, get certified by audits, start with internal auditors, get it certified, and if they feel comfortable, then you incrementally migrate these applications. These are the cases we've not seen this before. Now, synthetic data being used to test the new applications, new infrastructure, new platforms, then build that confidence for the customers or business. So that's also another area which we have seen a significant uptick. Lastly, the testing for these SaaS products and CARTS products. And these are always like a black boxes, especially if you take CARTS product, you know very little about those products. They don't necessarily expose their backend data models and structures to you. Everything is hidden inside the code. How can you make your data still intelligent enough to give me a copy which exactly comes out of these black boxes? That's another area where we see again potential with more and more applications becoming SaaS oriented and more vendor locked products that some of our customers are using. We can use the intelligence from the machine learning models to learn from the data, learn from the business specifications, and create it. Those are the four areas I would say we're seeing a lot of interest in customers.
And I will say that I do agree that across all the customers that I've been working with over the past 10 years, the regulations, the governance structures, the locking down of the data so you can't use it, you can't use production data to test has just been increasingly difficult, or it has to be masked, or it has to be encrypted, or it just seems like a breath of fresh air. Anything you want to add, Michael Larsen?
Sure. I mean, most of what I was going to be following up on, Pat just basically summed up for me. But then, like I like to basically come out with is I like to end these shows with the idea of saying you get somebody who either doesn't know about this, or is skeptical about it, or wants to understand more. What is your elevator pitch to them? to say, hey, in 30 seconds, this is why this matters to you, and this is why you should care about it?
We are at a tipping point. Technology is changing so fast. We are living in a macro economy. I have to have things cost effective. I need to have things delivered today, not a week later. In some cases, I've seen I want this to be delivered yesterday. So the speed aspect is coming in. Continuous growing regulations and privacy is also being a burden by a lot of businesses. How can I focus on actually creating the applications, focusing on the customers, less worry about the privacy and compliance? Lastly, how can you make it easily accessible? I don't want these solutions because they are so complex. These are machine learning and advanced analytics. How easily we can make these accessible via self-service approaches, self-service channels. Those are the key points we have to consider or keep in mind. That will definitely get you to the North Star, what you're looking for.
For Ally, as I said earlier, technology is at the center of everything we do. It's the fuel that drives our growth. We view that innovation happens at the intersection of three things: differentiated customer experiences, driving business value, and using contemporary technology. The speed at which that technology is changing today means that our engineers need to move faster than they ever have. And the one thing holding them back is not having the test data that they need to be able to prove to others that their solutions work. Synthetic data gives us the opportunity to solve that, and it will be the underpinnings of how we innovate going forward.
Well, fantastic. As is always the case, if people want to get to know more about either of you, or how can they get in touch with you if they want to know more, this is your chance to give your plug. Where can people find you? Extra resources, articles that might be of interest, etc.
For me, they can certainly hit me up through LinkedIn. That's the best way to find me.
For me, I have two. One is LinkedIn. Second is qualitestgroup.com. I'm always available. I'm an enthusiast in the data. So hit me on that LinkedIn. I'm happy to take up any questions and have follow-ups with you.
Fantastic. Well, I want to say again, thank you so much for joining us. And again, to all of our listeners, we thank you very much for joining us on the Testing Show, and we look forward to coming back to you again with another episode very soon. Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. Bye.
That concludes this episode of The Testing Show. We also want to encourage you, our listeners, to give us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, and the other places that The Testing Show can be found. Those ratings and reviews help raise the visibility of the show and lets more people find us. Matt and Michael have written a book that has distilled many years of this podcast, along with our decades of experience, and you can get a copy of it for yourself. Software Testing Strategies, a testing guide for the 2020s, is published by Pact Publishing and is available from Pact Publishing directly from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other online booksellers. Also, we want to invite you to come join us on The Testing Show Slack channel as a way to communicate about the show. Talk to us about what you'd like to hear and who you'd like to hear from, and also help us shape future shows. Please email us at thetestingshow@qualitestgroup.com and we will send you an invite to join the group. The Testing Show is produced and edited by Michael Larsen, moderated by Matt Heusser, with frequent contributions from our many featured guests who bring the topics and expertise to make the show happen. Thanks for listening.